Hello, welcome to the Roundtable. It is already August, which means we are more than halfway through the year. The summer vacation season is in full swing, but the world is always busy around the clock with numerous issues. Our experts' analysis will keep you stay up to date on trending global issues. Here are today's guests. We are joined by Professor Kim Hae-na. Welcome to the Roundtable.
Thanks for having me again.
We are also joined by Professor Choi Soo-jin. Welcome back, Professor Choi.
Glad to be back.
Following U.S. President Joe Biden's surprising departure from the presidential race, the U.S. presidential election is unfolding in new ways. Shortly after Biden announced his decision not to seek re-election, a surprising phenomenon happened: a surge in donations to the Democratic Party. Professor Choi, in perspective, compared to the Republican Party, how much political donation has been made for Democratic Party, and what does it mean to the presidential election?
Yeah, according to the Harris camp, they announced that they raised $81 million. And this was reported by the AP News as well. Right. And this donation has been raised within 24 hours after her declaring the presidential candidacy. And this amount of money is significantly more than the Trump's $53 million, which was raised in a single day after his May 30th verdict about his hush money case. And the Harris fundraising campaign has set a new record of the most money raised within a single day in the US presidential election history. So alongside this, public opinion poll number seems to be changing a little bit. The Reuters and Ipsos implemented a survey at the end of July, and they showed the lead of the Harris by 43% support ahead of Trump by 1 percentage point. So even though the gap itself is really minimal and it's within the margin of error, I think it's kind of showing the change in the public opinion climate. And in addition to this poll, the favorability index is also telling something. In the case of the Harris, 46% of the respondents were saying that Harris are favorable, and this is 6 percentage point increase from the 3 weeks ago. And in terms of the unfavorability index, Harris was 51%, and this was a decline of the 6 percentage point as well. But in contrast to this Harris favorability index, in the case of the Trump, it's in the opposite way. For the Trump, the favorability rating is 41%, with the unfavorability rating 56%. So by seeing this trend, it's showing that Harris is holding advantage over Trump, at least for now.
The Biden-Harris camp amended its filings with the Federal Election Commission and renamed its principal committee. It officially declared Kamala Harris as a candidate for president. Now it is Harris for president. Professor Kim, why was this necessary? Because the Democratic Party has not held a national convention in Chicago yet, right?
Right.
So what did they do so?
Right, so as you mentioned, after President Joe Biden conceded his candidacy to Kamala Harris, the first thing that the Biden campaign did was to change the campaign's name from Biden for President to Harris for President. And part of the reason why has to do with money. Last month, the Biden campaign amassed over $90 million, and this money was donated to President Biden and Vice President Harris as the Democratic candidates for President and Vice President. But now that's changed, and with that change, that money may not be usable. So the campaign specified in the documents as it was changing its wording that Harris is no longer a vice presidential candidate, but a presidential candidate, and that henceforth campaign activities will be conducted solely to pursue that position. So this move allows Vice President Harris to use the remaining money and keep it in the campaign funds. But also it's important that to secure funding as well. After Biden's poor performance in the first presidential debate, this negatively impacted the willingness of donors to contribute. And so, for example, Netflix co-founder Reed and Abigail Disney, who's one of the heiresses to the Walt Disney fortune, they declared that they would halt donations until Biden was replaced. So changing this campaign slogan immediately would allow people like that to provide more donations. And so as Professor Choi mentioned, after Biden announced his withdrawal, Democratic donation platform ActBlue raised a lot of money that same day.
With the election less than 3 months away, both the Republican and Democratic parties are ratcheting up their campaign fundraising efforts. Professor Choi, campaign finance matters in the U.S. presidential election, that's for sure, and it is known as a money war.
Right.
How do these parties, collect so much money?
Well, according to the Center for Responsive Politics, they said that the election, which was taken place in the most recent one, was the 2020 election, right? And the election money reached $14 billion, and this has been doubled since the 2016 election. And it's more than 100 times the cost of the total spending in the South Korean presidential election in 2022. And this money is equivalent to the annual GDP of the Madagascar, the African island nation with a 26 million population. So it's really a huge money. And I think given this trend, this year's presidential election will spend even more than this, right?
Right.
Yeah. So according to the professor Michael Kang at Northwestern University, he thinks that there's 3 factors that are affecting the rise of the election spending. The first is the inflation. Inflation is playing a significant role. And second is there is continuous money race between the Democrats and the Republicans, where the both sides are trying to keep upping the money over and over and over to outpace each other. And the third reason might be the 2010 Supreme Court decision, which is known as the Citizens United. Right. And they removed the limit of election spending by citing the protection of the First Amendment, which is the freedom of speech. So I think these 3 factors might have contributed to the ever-increasing spending of the election campaign, likening to the money war that you just mentioned.
Let's see. I mean, this is huge amount of money, however you slice it. So Kim, Professor Choi explained how the fundraising is made. Then let's talk about how the money is spent.
Right, so, it is a lot of money, but also US elections are very expensive. And historically, they've also been very expensive too. So according to reports, the 2016 US election cost around $6.5 billion US for the presidential and congressional elections combined. And both Hillary Clinton and Trump spent nearly all of their funds during their campaign. And the high costs are due to many different reasons. According to Professor Yoo Hae-young, about 50% of the funds are spent on advertising, with significant portions also going to fundraising efforts, hiring staff, and paying their salaries, but also providing health insurance for their employees. But in terms of this advertising, these campaigns have to go to many different places. So the high costs are also in part due to the large geographical area. They have a lot of ground to cover. And also there's a lack of a set of campaign period, meaning that it allows them to campaign immediately after the previous election, and it can go on and on and on.
Okay. So, Professor Choi, I think the donations by individual supporters may not be enough to amass such an astronomical figure of the political donation. What are the roles of the so-called the big hands behind the scene, and just how do these fundraising, get made?
Well, the huge money of this, fundraising and the election spending can be attributed to the Special American System, which is called the Super PAC, the Political Action Committee. So it's PAC, right? And the PAC was first formed in 1944 to raise the money for the re-election of the President Franklin Roosevelt at that time. And the PAC can donate the money directly to the candidate, but there was a limit of $5,000. However, in 2010, after the Supreme Court decision that I previously mentioned, the Citizens United, the committee can donate limitless amount of money, and they can create the political advertisements as long as they do not coordinate directly with the candidate.
I see.
And this committee is called the Super PAC.
So Super PAC can spend as much money as it can, as long as the spending is not directly connected with the presidential candidate themselves, right?
Yes.
But they can promote some positive messages about the candidate, right? Okay, good.
Also the negative message about
negative
the
message
other
about
candidate
the other,
as well.
That might be the most important area of the
right.
spending, right?
And in addition to that, the merchandise can be created by the presidential candidate themselves, and they sell them to their supporters.
I see.
The items is usually costing like $10 to $50, so it's not that pricey. But you know, many supporters for Trump's or Harris, they are buying those products, and it has been reaching like millions of dollars through the past campaign record. That has been a key funding source for the presidential candidates. So for instance, Trump has raised $7.1 million in 2 days after his trial by selling the T-shirts and posters featuring his mugshot.
A mugshot,
Yeah.
right. I remember the T-shirts, right? Professor Kim, let's bring in your expertise in statistics. The candidate who raised even 1 penny more than the opponents always win the election.
So usually the candidate who spends or raises the most money wins. This is especially because the spending more money by a candidate means that they have more money. They raised more money, and when they raise more money, that means that they have a lot more support. So logically, we would assume that candidates who raise more money have an advantage in terms of winning the elections. And while money is strongly associated with political success, it doesn't always guarantee a win. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition when it comes to political success. And research has suggested that money isn't the deciding factor when it comes to winning an election. And so because even though a lot of campaigns are spending money on advertising, first, most people already know who the political candidates are, and they have a lot more awareness and a lot more information on these different politicians and the issues that they support. And also, partisan politics has gotten so much even more polarized that these advertisements are becoming less and less effective. And so in that sense, money isn't the only thing that really matters. So for example, in 2016, Hillary Clinton raised more than Trump, but she ended up losing the election.
And that's a very good example.
Yeah.
Considering the U.S. vast territory and unique electoral system, the significance of campaign funds cannot be underestimated. On the flip side, there are concerns that U.S. politics can be swayed or even dominated by the wealthy. In 2017, the New York Times said that American democracy was drowning in money. Professor Kim, any comments on this?
I think it's true to a certain extent. We can't deny that money is influential, not just in politics, but in everything. And this is becoming more prominent in US elections, especially with growing income disparity. And studies have shown that economic elites do play a substantial part in affecting politics. But influence also does go beyond the campaigns as well. So people with money can be influential even without spending their money. For example, Elon Musk.
Right.
Elon Musk's comments have been discussed on various internet platforms. But at the same time, I don't want to be too pessimistic. I think there's a lot more transparency with how people spend money and what kind of contributions are going to whom. And in that sense, people are becoming more interested in how funds are being donated, how they're being spent. And in that sense, I think that the influence of money, I would hope, is not too strong when it comes to political success.
We understand that television ads, logos, stickers, staplers, and staffers. They are all needed to run political campaigns, and they all cost money. But we hope that money will be well spent in elections to help keep democracy thriving. Let's move on to the second topic, which is about money as well. But it is more directly related to our lives. Take a look at a video clip first.
To help curb greenhouse gas emissions, Denmark is taxing livestock farmers $44 for their cattle's farts. In Veneto, Italy, there is a tax levied on business owners whose signs create shadows on public property or walkways. This is to ensure access to natural daylight. At a Venezuelan airport, passengers have to pay a tax for the air they breathe. This is to cover the cost of the airport system to purify air and provide fresh oxygen. Let's take a look at unique taxes levied in countries around the world, which demonstrate their historical, cultural, and social values. A tax on sweeties? There are sugar taxes in multiple countries. In 1922, Norway introduced a tax collected on chocolate and sugar for the first time in the world. Mexico, the world's largest consumer of carbonated drinks, is charging a sugar tax of $0.05 per liter. Finland, the UK, and Thailand are also levying taxes on sugary foods and beverages as a way to reduce obesity and protect public health. If you are in Arkansas and want to get tattooed, ready to pay a tax. Since 2005, the U.S. state imposes a 6% tax on tattoos. The tax is also applied to body piercings. This means those who are up for tattoos and body piercings have to pay extra. In India, reeling from sweltering heat waves with the mercury hovering above 40 degrees Celsius. A tanker collapsed during a live broadcast as the air conditioning system was not working in the studio. But Indian people have to pay a tax for using air conditioners. Restaurants with air conditioners installed have to pay a tax, which amounts to 40% of their sales. It is a policy to prevent tax evasion by the wealthy. A tax on motor vehicles running on the road? In an effort to ease environmental issues, the Netherlands proposed a bill to charge a motor vehicle tax of $0.033 per kilometer on the odometer. However, electric vehicles and buses are exempt from the tax.
I'm a proponent of the tax. I think it's a positive thing. There's going to be a meter inside of the car, which is going to record how much distance the car has traveled, and at the end of the month, you have to pay a small fee depending on how much you've driven. I think that's something that the current government is looking into. So as far as I know, I think that's pretty unique. I am not sure about the current time, but I do know in the past there used to be a tax based on the width of a building and even on the length of curtains. So I think if you look back in time, there has always been a kind of unique angle looking at the way we have been imposing taxes.
These unique, interesting tax systems around the world show the challenges the countries are faced with.
There are various tax systems around the world which reflect the country's economic and industrial situations. First, Kim, compared to other countries, does South Korea have any unique tax system?
I think it's a little bit unique. So in the United States, for example, if there's a price that you see, you assume that there's going to be an additional tax that's added on, right? So we kind of estimate that or calculate that beforehand. In Japan, there's a price and then the price with the taxes that are also provided separately. But in Korea, we just get one fixed price, right? And we take that price at face value. But we do know that the taxes are hidden in these prices and that they are often unrecognizable because of that. And so they're virtually almost like shadow taxes. And so, for example, movie ticket prices include a 3% charge. Airfare includes fees on passengers flying out, which is about 11,000 won. That's a departure tax that's charged at airports. And also the international exchange contribution shows that when you're issuing a 10-year passport, there's a 15,000 won charge that's added on. And with these kinds of small charges, there are around 91 different types of charges. And about 17.6 billion US dollars are to be collected this year from these taxes.
90-something shadow taxes.
Yeah.
I don't like it. Professor Che, why are these charges?
Well, these charges were introduced in 1961, and it has been rapidly increasing during the economic development in the 1980s in South Korea. And the main purpose of these charges was to support the public project aiming at bridging the gap that has been caused by the rapid economic growth. The examples of these charges are the Electric Power Fund for the underdeveloped energy regions and for instance, the water use levy to improve the water quality. And the number of these levies have increased from 7 in 1960s to 95 in 1990s and peaked at 102 at 2000s. And as of 2024, it's currently at the number of 91, so it's still a lot.
91 shadow tax categories.
Yeah, right, it's still a lot. And the reasons that these levies are still there is because it's very easy to collect and easy to spend. And it could be added on the movie tickets or electricity bills without even noticed by the users, as you just mentioned. And it could be included in the fund or the special accounts. So for the government departments and the local authorities, they can easily collect them and use them for the public projects. So because of these reasons, the levies has been a long-standing presence in Korea.
I see. But Professor Kim, South Korean government recently announced the plans to overhaul the charge collection system.
So, as Professor Choi just mentioned, a lot of these are outdated and they are relatively inconsistent, especially because they remain outdated and they are not, reflecting changing times right now. And in that sense, they're not being properly executed as well. And so I think because of that, the current administration is working to try to address these charges, figure out their original purposes and understand to what extent which ones should continue to stay and how they should be modified, if at all. And so, as Professor Choi mentioned, they used to be used to fund specific projects, but if they're not doing that anymore, they're not serving their original purpose. So because of that, it's become a heavy burden on people who are wondering why they're paying so much without realizing that these shadow taxes exist.
Right. So, Professor Choi, what are the charges that are going to be abolished by the South Korean government, and how do they affect our daily lives?
Well, the government announced that they plan to abolish 32 or reduce 32 out of the 91 levies. And some of those changes are closely related to our daily lives. For example, they are going to abolish the admission charge, which was imposed on the movie tickets. So for instance, if the movie ticket costs $11, 40 cents of that is the levy. So if the levy is dropped out, that it means the ticket price will go down by 40 cents. And in addition, they are trying to reduce the departure fee, which is imposed on the airline ticket. I think this has been mentioned by Professor Kim previously. It will be going down from $8 to $5. And they are also thinking of reducing the levy imposed for the passport issuance. So for the single entry passport, we had to pay $3.6, but this will be removed. And for the 10-year multiple entry passport, we had to pay $11, but this will be reduced by $2.2. And actually, many people are welcoming this overhaul of the levy system, but there are still some concerns because this change is very small. It's not a tangible benefit for the general citizens to feel it, right? And if these levies are all removed, then there might be some budget gap for the public project which has been previously funded by this levy system.
I see. Professor Kim, Professor Choi already mentioned this, but a reduction of the shadow taxes will force the government to raise tax from elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
So what would be the negative impact of this overall tax system by South Korea in terms of making the budget?
So in one way, removing these levies and replacing them with different taxes would result to the same thing.
Right.
If anything, we could see prices fluctuating a lot more, which could lead to a lot of concerns for the general public. But also the government plans to cover these budget shortages through state financing and efficient fund management. So we can hope that even though the amount might be small, we might be able to see some changes in the future.
I see. Benjamin Franklin said in 1789, "Nothing is certain except death and taxes." Over 200 years later, it still rings true. This is all for today. We'll be back next week with more latest issues. Professor, thank you so much for your insight and very interesting experiences.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching and goodbye.